Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another segment of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but we want to give our sponsors a shout out. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies that I used. I want you to listen to the shout outs, and then I want you to go visit these sponsors. You're going to be glad you did. So stay with us for the next couple minutes. Here we go. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to have you creating world-class marketing content in seconds to celebrate your athletes and promote your program. It's Gipper.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to showcase your school's unique history and your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. We want to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We want to thank Snap Raise for their support. If you're looking for a fundraiser, look no more. Snap Raise is hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. It works. Go to snapraise.com. Take a look at their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Go to snapraise.com. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years. As an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches, all of our coaches, just love the tools that Huddle provided. Our kids love the videos, our parents love the streaming, but there's a lot more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We'd like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. You can schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com for more information. We'd like to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, and it was a great experience. And the program also includes 11 NIAAA leadership training courses, all for the same cost. Go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters. We'd like to thank Home Campus for their support, whether it's scheduling, rosters, scores, student athlete eligibility, and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Home Campus does all of those things, and it does it better and it does it faster. To get started, just go to homecampus.com. That's it, homecampus.com. And we'd like to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Our school, we use surveys for everything, kids, coaches, parents, and the information that comes back is incredibly valuable, whether you're meeting with a frustrated parent or your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. You're going to be glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going out to California today, and our guest is Cassie Akemann. She's got an incredible background in athletics. She was a high school track star. She worked for a little company called NBC in a sports capacity. She's currently an enterprise development account representative for a company called Greenfly. We're going to hear about all of that and more. But Cassie Akemann, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Hey, Jake. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm excited to be here.
Well, again, for our listeners, we're recording this on July 31st, so it's going to be pretty timely when you're listening to it. Busy time for athletic directors and coaches and the people that they work with. So let's go and jump right in. Cassie, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up. For you, maybe take us up through your high school days, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll hear about college and beyond. But What's the Cassie Akemann origin story?
Yeah, so I'm born in Santa Cruz, California. I was actually born in a small town called Ben Lomond. Chances are no one's ever heard of it. There are less than 7,000 people in that small town. It's in the Redwood Forest, about 15 minutes away from the ocean. Absolutely beautiful area to grow up. And I went to a small high school called San Lorenzo Valley High School. I started playing sports when I was in elementary school. I think I started off with soccer. It was probably my first love in the world of sports. In middle school, I went on to play a little bit of basketball. I was shockingly never great at it, considering today I stand at 6'2", much to the dismay of all of my coaches. I don't think I was ever aggressive enough to really get in there and make the plays. Uh, Funny story, actually. I started running track because I tried out for my high school volleyball team and didn't make the roster. I like to say, everything happens for a reason because I, ended up, getting a college scholarship, breaking some records in our county. Yeah, so I don't think I was supposed to play volleyball. And also to my own credit, I wasn't quite this tall yet when I was cut from the volleyball roster. I think there were still girls who were taller than me at the time.
Well, I'm actually, I don't want to say one of the few, but I actually, know that area a little bit. We actually lived in San Jose back in the late 90s. I was the first athletic director at the Harker School in San Jose. And so, we made that trip to Santa Cruz and the surrounding areas with our team several times. Um, let's go back to, that beginning in sports. You talked about soccer. I'm going to guess maybe that was, little kid soccer.
Mhm.
But you found your niche in track. Track people, as we are a different breed. So what was it about track that first got you pulled in, and then how did that develop over the course of your career, your Hall of Fame career, if I might add?
Thank you. It's funny because I always credit this one PE teacher, shout out Miss Keel, for kind of sparking my interest in track and field. I remember like so distinctly, we had a PE unit where we were doing the high jump. And once again, I remember so distinctly doing something so improperly. Thinking back, I think I did kind of a Western roll, and Miss Keel gave me, the best compliment. She was like, Cassie just did X, Y, and Z. Like, look at how perfectly she did it. And, that really stroked my seventh grade ego enough to, have me running to the track. So I think, yeah, that little ego boost was what it was what first sent me to the track. And honestly, I don't think I ever had any expectations for myself starting off. I was kind of just doing this thing because I hadn't made the volleyball team and I thought I might be good at it. I happened to get really, really lucky. My dad knew a man through his gym who happened to be a collegiate high jump coach in the past, and my dad connected me with this guy. I started going out to the track with him in seventh grade, trained with him all the way through high school. Lo and behold, this man had coached, a handful of Olympians, NCAA record holders in the high jump, all Americans. So I just got really lucky to kind of have an elite caliber of training from a very young age.
I coached high school for years, also coached college for a number of years. I'm still an official. Work college meets. I work, our state championships here in Florida. And it's always interesting for me to see different approaches, literally, in the high
Mhm.
jump. I was a high school high jumper. I was okay. I was more of a hurdler. Did the high jump in the decathlon when I was in college, but um, the J approach, it seems like it's the way to go. And yet, even today, I'll see, half circles and other things at a high level.
Crazy.
What's your thought about that as a former elite high school high jumper?
Yeah, I would want to hear what your strategy was as well, because I was so annoying out at every track meet when I was getting my approach kind of set up. I would have a measuring tape and I'd need a coach to help me kind of swing out an arc. It was a big kind of like geometric equation setting up my approach every time. So I would go to the standard, pull out my measuring tape, kind of swing an arc to find a middle point. So essentially, when I went to go take my jump, I would be starting at the back of that J, run straight, and as soon as I hit my, middle mark, I would start kind of swinging a left turn because I'm coming from the right side to make my way to the bar. But it was a very kind of like mathematical approach. And I think, by nature of having a pretty elite high jump coach, my setup was a bit more technical than some others in the space. But yeah, I have also definitely seen some pretty quirky setup approaches in the high jump.
Yeah, well, that's a subject for another podcast. You and I can compare high jump notes. Um, I know I mentioned this, I think maybe you and I were off air, but you're obviously at the start of your professional career, and I'm sure you're going to have tremendous success in a variety of areas. Can you look back to a moment, middle school, high school, even college? We're going to talk about your college days later, that at the time it really didn't seem like much, but now looking back with all your years of experience, you can say, hey, that was a significant moment for me. Anything stick out
Yeah.
for you?
There are moments that I can definitely speak to, but I think in general, the the best lesson I ever learned from high jump is kind of how to rebound from failure. As a high jumper, I'm sure you know this. You get 3 attempts to clear a bar. Even if you win the competition, your last jump is a miss. So essentially, regardless of winning a competition, you're leaving as a failure. And it's not easy to kind of rebound from that. I think that doing track for so many years at such a high level kind of granted me the opportunity to fail at scale. I've had so many reps of failure that I think I'm able to bounce back in a way that maybe I wouldn't be able to had I not been so conditioned in that space. I can I can think of times in track too, like where I've been really afraid to do something. Maybe the bar goes up to 6 feet, and I've never cleared that height before, and I'm scared, but you know, I have this kind of like deep innate belief in myself that I'm capable of doing kind of whatever I set my mind to. I think high jump instilled, yeah, a sense of confidence and a sense of belief in myself that I wouldn't have garnered outside of that world.
No, and that's a great point. That as a high jumper, as a pole vaulter, even you're that last attempt, unless you win it and you walk away, hey, I set a new personal best or a new record. That last attempt very often is going to be a miss. So great way to look at things. We're going to go and take a break. But for our guests, we're visiting today with Cassie Akemann. She is a enterprise development rep with a company called Greenfly. We're going to hear more about that later on. But let's take that break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support of the podcast. Your student athletes and a lot of their parents are on social media. And if they're not seeing content that you've created to celebrate their accomplishments and promote your own program, you're really missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. Their team will have you creating world-class content in seconds, and it's so easy, even I can do it. It's Gipper.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. Gipper.com. We also want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to showcase your school's unique history and brag about your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. And we'd like to say thank you to Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more, but I'm going to. The team at Hometown will show you how to set up and sell tickets online, not just for athletic events, but for things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every team gets a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com for more information. It's digital ticketing that offers more. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is Cassie Akemann. Cassie, you took us up through your high school experience. Maybe this segment we're going to focus on your college experience. Maybe let's do a bridge. What was the recruiting process like for you? You were high school in California, but you ended up at SMU. How did that all happen?
Yeah, funny story. I had actually never heard of SMU ever before I was recruited by them. And actually, I think you hear that from more student athletes than not, just given, there's only so many Power Five schools. Um, like I mentioned earlier, I was really privileged to have a very elite high jump coach who was very plugged in throughout the collegiate network. So I was introduced to a lot of coaches. I was also jumping kind of on the junior national circuit. So I think I had some visibility there. My metrics spoke for themselves. I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but back when I was being recruited, they were sending out letters to us. So I'd get letters in the mail from universities. When the kind of recruiting deadline period opened up, I would start to get calls from universities. I took official visits to 5 different universities and ultimately decided to go to SMU. It was one of the better academic institutions that was recruiting me. They were offering me a healthy scholarship, and I loved the women on the team. The campus was beautiful. All around, just a really great, like holistic package deal. Yeah, that was kind of the recruiting process.
Now, you mentioned yourself, small town, California. How was that? What are your memories of, hey, I got a letter from this school or that school? That had to be kind of exciting.
Oh gosh, yeah, it was so exciting. I'd never heard of a lot of these universities in the South or on the East Coast before they started reaching out. I remember our athletic director from my high school would, pop his head into my math class sometimes and like drop off letters for me, and I felt so cool. They were sending letters to my house as well, but it was a really exciting experience to kind of have the opportunity to talk to coaches on the East Coast and learn more about what my opportunities were outside of California and outside of being in a pretty small town where people stayed pretty local for college.
Well, you chose SMU. They chose you. You chose each other. How was that coming on? Were you, and these are my words, these are not yours. Were you the hotshot freshman that dominated? Was there a learning curve there, jumping up to Division One? No pun intended there, jump. How did that all go?
Oh gosh, I would love to say I was the hotshot freshman and it was an easy transition, but I think probably as you hear from most young collegiate athletes, the transition was hard. I definitely was excited for the new adventure, and I don't really think I was homesick, but the transition to working with a new coach, having a different training schedule, balancing classes into my workload was definitely tough. And I think, going from high school athletics to collegiate athletics, regardless of the caliber of coaching you might have had in high school, you're kind of forced to learn a new language because processes are just different. And the way your new coach communicates is likely different from the way your old coach communicates too. So I don't want to say I was expected to be a hot shot, and I don't want to say that I was, but I think that like the highlight of my freshman year in that transition was really, adapting to the learning curve. Yeah.
Okay. Um, you were a multi state finalist at the high school level. How and you spent a couple of seasons there at SMU. What was I guess maybe your career highlight at SMU as a high jumper?
My career highlight as a high jumper at SMU. You know what? It was probably my very first indoor conference meet. Um, in track and field, your stats speak volumes. I was talking to a friend about this the other day. You go to a meet and you're kind of expected to do your job. You come in ranked, fourth, you're expected to perform, you're expected to get fourth. I remember coming into my first indoor conference meet my freshman year. I want to say I was ranked like sixth going in. So my job was to get sixth. Um, it was at, oh gosh, it was in Birmingham, Alabama, at their kind of track indoor metroplex. And I ended up getting second place. It was just like a phenomenal experience. My coaches were elated, everyone was stoked. And yeah, I felt like I did my job. It was a great, that's probably one of the like prouder moments I had. I had better performances throughout SMU, but just kind of, surpassing expectations was awesome.
No, and you're so right. In track and field or swimming, any sport where the stopwatch is involved or the measuring tape, um, it becomes your identity. You are, this fast, or you can jump this far or so high. I remember this is 100 years ago when I was in college. We still did dual track meets, and our coach would dope out the points. And he'd say, okay, well, Jake's going to get second in the 400 hurdles. And I go, wait a minute, hey, I'm going to beat that guy. And he goes, well, your time doesn't say that right now. So I said, go out and beat that guy. And then, we'll rank you higher. But, again, part of that was motivation too. He knew I was going to respond to that. Um, you mentioned to me previously that you actually entered the transfer portal. I can say with 100% confidence, you are the very first, and at this point, the only guest we've had on the podcast that has experienced the transfer portal. So, what was that like? Share with our listeners. We got a lot of coaches, we got a lot of ADs that are listening right now.
You know what? My transfer portal experience probably is not as exciting as others, so manage your expectations. Um, I ran 4 years of track and field at SMU. There are instances in which you are granted an additional year of eligibility. I competed during COVID. All athletes throughout my class were granted an extra year of eligibility during COVID. We called it a COVID year. So when I graduated my senior year, I still had a year of eligibility left. At that point, transparently, I just wasn't ready to go into the real world and be a grown up. So I thought I'd throw my name in the transfer portal. I didn't necessarily want to get a graduate degree from SMU. There wasn't anything that really piqued my interest. So I thought maybe I'll use my extra year, get a grad degree somewhere else, and run again or jump again rather. So basically, the way that it worked in my instance was I kind of worked through our compliance department, flagged my name within kind of the NCAA transfer portal, an online web portal, and after a certain date, coaches were allowed to reach out to me and attempt to recruit me to their schools. What I quickly realized was a lot of the universities that were recruiting me, they might have been great sports institutions, but they weren't necessarily places where I wanted to spend a year getting a graduate degree. Um, so I ultimately decided to kind of tie a bow on my track career after my fourth year at SMU, and I ended up going to grad school kind of on my own accord, academically, completely separate from track.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a point that a lot of times, let's say the high school coach or the high school AD doesn't think about. We're always looking for that good fit
Mhm.
athletically, but especially academically, because that's what the student is going to be doing the rest of their life. So, very cool. Thanks for sharing that experience. You mentioned that graduate experience, and it is pretty interesting. We're going to go and take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to have you share that with our listeners. Once again, our guest today is Cassie Akemann. She's a rep with Greenfly. You're going to hear about that too, but let's go and take that break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to say thank you to our good friends at Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraising project and then been disappointed in the results? Those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Snapraise.com. You're going to be glad you did. We also want to say thank you to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a huddle school. And our coaches, all of our coaches, just loved the tools that Huddle provided that let them coach our kids to the next level. Our kids love the videos, our parents love the streaming, but there's a whole lot more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a huddle school. Welcome back, everybody, to the Education Lady podcast. Cassie, you were sharing with our listeners, your career at SMU, your experience with the transfer portal. I'm sorry that $8 million deal didn't come through for you, but something else happened. You ended up going to graduate school, and your experience, I'm just going to phrase it that way, I think is something that would really have impact for our listeners. So can you tell our listeners kind of how you ended up, where you ended up, and then what you ended up doing?
Yeah, you know what, Jake? It's really interesting. I'm here because I work in sport and I have a really robust, sport kind of background, but I never really ever intended on working in sport. Um, I After SMU, I did a dual degree with the London School of Economics and the University of Southern California. So I did one master's degree in global media at the LSE in London, and then the following year I did a master's of art in global communication with a concentration in marketing at USC. But I wrote my whole application essay on wanting to work for the UN. So I really thought, I want to work in advocacy, social justice in some capacity, maybe policy. Um, it's interesting because if you look at my kind of internship experience at SMU, I interned in athletics PR. I did a project with the social team at the NFL. I was on our NCAA student athlete advisory committee. My experience was pretty sports oriented, but I think I kind of saw this stigma in like being an athlete and staying within sport. I felt like it was a little bit superficial, or maybe superficial is the wrong word, or like too stereotypical. Yeah, a little bit too stereotypical, cliche. So, and I was passionate about advocacy. I got to LSE and I was tasked with writing a thesis or a dissertation. And I really sat down and thought about, what do I want to spend countless hours of my life researching and reading and writing about? And I kept coming back to kind of the sphere of women's sports. And I realized that I could kind of blend these passions for advocacy and sport. So I ultimately wrote my first thesis at LSE on kind of the media narrative at the time, which is still very applicable today, about investment in women's sports. So this was back in 2021, 2022. The conversation was still, a bit earlier than the conversation we're having today regarding investment in women's sport. But what I decided to do, which I think is a little bit unconventional, is, dissect the media narrative that was occurring. I actually came at it from a very critical approach and critiqued mainstream media for the way they were positioning women's sports as a business opportunity or investment opportunity. I actually found that a lot of times they were positioning women's sports as a charity case, which I argue devalued the actual product of the sport and the actual ROI associated with the product.
Yeah, and again, the timing of it, it's interesting to see what's taken place. And by no means are we done and we're patting ourselves on the back, but obviously it's changed dramatically in the last couple of years. Who knows? You might have been part of that tipping point to see that tremendous growth in women's sports. And back when you were starting, I remember talking about the national soccer team, the women's national team, they were winning, and the men's team was not winning, but they were getting paid more, and that whole discussion, it just grew and grew and grew. So, what do you think? What are your feelings now, a couple of years after you created that critique about, let's say, where we're at now, but obviously where we still need to go?
Yeah, I think that it's abundantly clear now that women's sports are not solely corporate social responsibility and they're not, an opportunity for charity. There is real ROI associated with women athletes and women's sports leagues. I mean, you know, look at Angel City FC, just sold to Bob Iger. and Willow Bay for $250 million. It's the most, I think I want to say it was the largest, highest value sold women's sports team in history. Um, when I went to USC, I continued to kind of look at female athletes. I investigated NIL, name, image, likeness policies, and I specifically looked at how female athletes were mobilizing NIL legislation kind of separate from their male counterparts. Like, what are the main differences? What are the similarities? Where is there inequality, and where are women kind of, beating out their male counterparts? And what was abundantly clear is that women know how to market themselves because they've always had to market themselves because mainstream media never gave them, equivalent opportunities compared to their male counterparts. And I think, as we look at women's sports today, that kind of historical past where they've had to market themselves and they've had to find resources outside of a system that kind of disenfranchised them, um, is really evident today. We look at, media companies like Together, The Gist, Just Women's Sports. You know, these are organizations that came to fruition out of necessity. There was no there were no channels that prioritize women, and now you look at them and there's all of these digital monetization opportunities, and you see big players trying to bring themselves into that wheelhouse, um, that women athletes have been existing in for the past however many years.
Right. You made a comment there that, women do a better job of marketing themselves. I want to say I heard this, so I'm not saying this is fact or anything. Maybe you can correct me or validate me here. Is that in looking at NCAA totality NIL deals, that there are actually more women student athletes with NIL deals than there are male athletes. Probably to that point that, it's not, let's say, an $8 million deal, but it's something that an athlete or a school or a coach has developed. Have you heard something like that?
That's 100% true, Jake. Women athletes are beating out their male counterparts at honestly astonishing rates in terms of NIL brand deal um, transactions by volume. They're executing more deals. However, if you look at kind of the revenue that they're bringing in compared to their male counterparts, that's where we still have a bit of inequality. And I think a lot of that can be traced back to collectives.
Oh, without a doubt. And again, here we are. I don't know how long NIL has actually been a real thing because there was a long discussion, but I think a year from now, I guess this is me getting on my soapbox. Hopefully, a year from now, there's going to be some changes. Maybe a little more attention to all sports, not just the big sports. Bringing these collectives under control. I'm very much in favor of student athletes. Getting paid and getting compensated, but maybe a little more equality. Cassie, we're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit more, and again, we haven't even gotten to the thing you do now with Greenfly, but if they wanted to maybe add you to their network, what's the best way that somebody can get a hold of Cassie Akemann?
Yeah, definitely feel free to shoot me a connection request on LinkedIn, send me a message. It's just Cassie Akemann. You can also email me, cassie@greenfly.com, but LinkedIn is probably the easiest, quickest, best way to kind of get my attention.
Yeah, and that's how I got your attention. Okay. Let's go and take another quick break. I know that's shocking for our regular listeners, but when we come back, I'm going to ask Cassie to share a little bit about what Greenfly is. And ADs and coaches, you're going to want to pay attention. I'm sure some of you are already using it. And also talk a little bit about what she does with Greenfly. So let's take that break, but we're coming back. This is the Education Lady Podcast. We want to say thank you to our good friends at Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made as an athletic director was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Of course, we use it for home games, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile and their customer service is just outstanding. The website is sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to say thank you to Ohio University and their online master's degree in athletic administration. This is an affordable 20-month, totally online program that also allows you to complete 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at the same time. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, and it was an incredible experience. To find out more, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters. And we want to thank our friends at Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, rosters, scores. How about student athlete eligibility and clearance? Who doesn't do that every day? Home Campus does all of these things and a lot more, and it does them better and it does them faster. To find out how you can join the Home Campus team, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's it, homecampus.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're visiting today with Cassie Akemann, and she works for a company called Greenfly. Cassie, I'm going to let you share with our listeners. I'm going to guess many of them might already be using the platform, but let's pretend that they're new to the world. What is Greenfly, and more importantly, why should our athletic directors and coaches be using it?
Yeah, so if you've never heard of Greenfly before, we're short form content technology built and designed specifically for sports teams and leagues. We were actually created about 10 years ago by MLB All-Star player Sean Green. We were created to kind of power the bi-directional flow of content. So what we really do is we enable organizations to create more short form content, AI organize that content, automatically distribute it, and then open up doors to monetize that short form content. In doing so, what we're really doing is we're saving staff time and resources. Like I said, unlocking kind of unrealized sponsor revenue and unlocking fan engagement opportunities. Yeah, and we work with the Big Ten, Michigan, UCF, to name a few, and then basically every major sports league in North America. So that's your NBAs, NHLs, MLBs of the world.
Since I've been to the website, I maybe have a head start on some of our listeners, but the application I think is really cool. I could see a high school using this themselves. I also think maybe a high school conference, a collection of schools, even a state association would really, really benefit from this. So can you share, again, I know you did the initial uh, pitch, if you will. You're not trying to sell it, you're just trying to explain, but share a little bit more about how Greenfly could help a conference or a state association.
Yeah, Greenfly is a really interesting tool because I mentioned the NBA, but we also work with small NGBs that have, 4 people on staff. So I think the NBA, they have hundreds or thousands of, admins and athletes and partners and sponsors onboarded into the platform to kind of access content and aggregate content and distribute content. But if you look at, a small NGB with 4 users and 4 staffers, Greenfly is still a really powerful tool because we help kind of manage the content ecosystem at large, and we're very scalable. So when you look at a association or a conference, I think that we really provide value in a couple ways. Number one, we are kind of creating a centralized content hub. So the conference or the athletic department has a space to oversee their member institutions or their universities' teams that they're working with. So in the Greenfly platform, That conference will sit over all of their member institutions, and then these member institutions have their individual working spaces to request content from athletes, distribute content to athletes. They have a place to organize and AI tag assets to identify scenes, identify sponsor logos. And they also have places to distribute content at scale to sponsors and athletes. So, really, what we're doing is creating a centralized content hub for all of your short form assets to kind of streamline and create operational efficiencies. I think another way we can create value kind of in the conference space is powering the workflow behind real time content collection. So if you look at, major leagues like the NBA or the NHL, there are photographers, mobile content creators on the sidelines capturing content. Our tool is built out to ensure that all of that content that's captured live on the sidelines can be accessed in real time, organized, and distributed to athletes to kind of speed up that social media posting process, ensure that everything is organized and libraried, and that you have a reliable inventory of all of the photos that are collected throughout your events. And I think that the last way, not the last way, but a really important way that Greenfly can help create value for conferences and associations, whether it's high school or college, is kind of in the sponsorship department. You look at short form content, and there's so many opportunities now to monetize moments. Greenfly can really unlock that value by creating a mechanism for you to organize, catalog, and distribute all of these assets, but also engage fans. Like, how do you collect content from fans that you can retain the ownership rights to? And how can you package and sell that to sponsors on the back end?
Cassie, the platform just sounds so cool. And you mentioned sponsorships. Now that got my attention. I know it got the attention of a lot of our listeners. How does Greenfly, help a program with their sponsorships and all the AI things that you shared?
So yeah, what we like to do at Greenfly is really unlock new sponsorship opportunities through your digital content. So maybe you're capturing photos and videos in game already. Jake and I were talking about this off camera a bit ago. Maybe you have a first down that's sponsored by Dick's Sporting Goods. Dick's Sporting Goods might have, some in venue logo signage. Via the Greenfly platform, any piece of content that is captured that features that Dick's Sporting Good logo will automatically be tagged and routed to a Dick's Sporting Good gallery. So now you have a reliable inventory of indexed assets that you can bring to Dick's Sporting Goods to sell back to them. We see pro leagues doing this all the time, creating sponsored moments. Maybe it's a vertical video in the end zone that's sponsored by a large corporate sponsor. We have AI functionality that can identify these key moments for your sales team, for your sponsorship team, for your commercial team. So they now have a reliable inventory of commercial assets to sell in upsell cycles. The value in the Greenfly platform kind of goes beyond that. We can track the usage of this content that is being shared through your athletes. So say you're distributing all of this in-game content with sponsor logos to your athletes. Say your athlete Jimmy, the quarterback, he's a top ranked recruit. He has 20,000 followers on social media. Now, all of a sudden, you can prove to your sponsors, hey, you have this in-venue logo, but look, when Jimmy, our quarterback, our top recruit, posts it to his social channels, you're increasing the reach of your logo by X, Y, and Z, which in turn increases the value of this sponsorship and partnership opportunity. So we're really seeing this tool used to upsell partners, unlock new kind of digital content monetization opportunities in this kind of, tough sports ecosystem. We're struggling out here. This is a great opportunity to kind of unlock some unrealized sponsorship opportunity.
Oh, I love it. And it's only limited by, your number of teams, your number of student athletes that you want to post out there. Great stuff. Um, You also mentioned when we were talking about fan engagement. Can you share a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
One of my favorite tools at Greenfly, and I think, well, I know the favorite tool of our university partners is a tool that we call Engage. So essentially, what we can do is we can spin up public facing web pages. These can be presented in the form of a QR code at a game, a QR code posted to social, a link posted to social. Via these public facing web pages, you can ask your fans to submit content on your behalf. So maybe there was a touchdown celebration that your social content team missed. You can spin up in real time, within a minute, a public facing web page and ask your fans, hey, did you capture that angle? We want to see it. So, really, what you're doing, asking them to submit content, they include any first party data that you want. So, that could be their name, their email, their social handles. And in doing that kind of submission, the rights to that content is transferred to your organization. So, what we're seeing over here at Greenfly is organizations are using this kind of UGC campaign, user generated content campaign, as an opportunity to engage their partners. Maybe it's, you know, touchdown celebration, once again, sponsored by Dick's Sporting Goods, just as a rogue example. But yeah, number one, fun way to engage your fans. High school fans, college fans are some of the biggest, craziest, wildest fans in all of sport, and they want to be engaged in their fandom. And then number two, how can we use this content, this really low lift content that's easy for us to source, to kind of drive additional revenue for our partners, for our team?
Wow, just a lot of stuff to unload there, but we obviously our listeners can find it at greenfly.com or they can get in touch with you. We'll give out your information again right at the end of the podcast. Cassie, thanks so much for sharing everything with us today, but we're not done. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're not an athletic director, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. We're going to take our final break. We're going to listen to Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put three things in the toolbox. So let's take that final break. And when we return, we're going to see what Cassie Akemann puts in her new athletic director toolbox. We'd like to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. You know, athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that just wants to complain about everything. Now, Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that content is extremely valuable, especially when you're visiting with a frustrated parent or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with Cassie Akemann. Tremendous background in athletics as an athlete, now as a professional in the area of, marketing and branding and AI. But right now, I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let her put three things in the toolbox. So, Cassie, what three items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
Yeah, I think that, as a former athlete myself, something that was really impactful from my past athletic directors is number one, getting to know your student athletes. I was really privileged to be at SMU. I saw Rick Hart, our former and current AD, the other day at a conference, and he addressed me by name. He brought us to his house for dinner, in different social groups, with student athlete advisory committee and whatnot. And getting to know us, he really created a sense of community. To kind of dovetail off of that, getting to know your athletes and creating a sense of community, I think athletic directors should rely on their student athletes as sources of truth and vehicles to kind of learn more about the inner workings of, their programs. Student athletes want to be involved, a lot of times have really innovative creative ideas. And if you've already created that community, I think that they'll feel comfortable coming to you and trusting you with, valuable knowledge and insight. So really leveraging your community of athletes as intel. And then lastly, I think all of my advice kind of stems around people. Invest in good coaches, good hiring practices, support your coaches, um, listen to their qualms and their issues. And I think that in, finding the right coaching staff and investing in people who are generally just good, your athletic program will thrive. At the end of the day, a lot of us, you're dealing day to day with kids, and investing in the right people is crucial for development, because as much as we care about sports, we want to make sure people are leaving these institutions as well-rounded people.
Well, those are three great tools. I want to give you a fourth. What would that be?
Okay, my bonus tool is to invest in short form content. Obviously, a little bit biased coming from the Greenfly perspective, but in today's day and age, your fans are active on every channel. They want to be entertained around live events, and they're tuning in to watch their favorite athletes. So investing in short form content is not only smart business, but it's a great recruiting mechanism. Kids want to see that their school is innovative. And nowadays with NIL and just, how pervasive social media is in our lives, kids want to be involved, and they are your best influencers. So by investing in short form content, you are, building your brand and ultimately unlocking new channels to drive revenue, contributing to your student athletes brands, and ultimately investing in short form content is good business.
No, absolutely. And again, I love how you, going back to your tools, you talked about, relying on and supporting, your students. And now, with
Yeah.
Greenfly, that's why we're all in the business, whether it's high school or college, it's for our students. So let's make sure we're doing everything we can to take care of them. Cassie, again, thanks so much for sharing with our listeners. All the best as you continue with Greenfly. One more time, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit, or find out more about Greenfly, how do they do that?
Yeah, feel free to shoot me an email at cassie@greenfly.com or hit me up on LinkedIn, Cassie Akemann. I am probably overly active there. So yeah, I would love to talk to anyone who's curious.
Cassie, thanks again for sharing with our listeners. And, we're definitely going to have to get you back on the podcast.
I would love to come back. Thank you so much, Jake.
Oh, you bet. We also want to say thanks to our listeners and remind you that we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, share stories and best practices. So we hope you'll come back for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast.